Welcome to Conversations with Laurel, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and today I am honored to introduce you to a prolific man of multiple degrees in media, Doctor of Arts and Humanities, Director of Documentary Arts, Alan Govenar. Alan, welcome to Conversations with Laurel.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I've done a little research on you, before this interview because you're kind of a big deal. I don't know if you know it yet, but you're kind of a big deal.
Um, I love what I do. The joy has always been in the making. And yes, I mean, and the attention my work's gotten is ebbs and flows. And what keeps me going is doing what I do.
Yeah, we'll get to a little bit more of doing what you do a little bit later. But you grew up in the inner city of Boston with very progressive parents. I'm a Braintree girl. I'm a suburbs Braintree girl raised by very conservative parents. So we came from similar location, but I think probably different upbringings. I have about 500 questions for you, but I'd like to focus our visit today on your most recent book, Come Round Right, which was just published this year. All right. Um, how about you give our listeners the elevator pitch for what they're going to find in Come Round Right?
Well, that's difficult to in terms of that. And I coincidentally just did a book event and on Saturday this
Okay.
week. And I do a lot of podcasts and different, and so I was in conversation with the publisher of the book, Will Evans. And what we decided was that the best way to describe what the book is was to read the first chapter, which isn't very long,
Okay.
because it basically says what it is.
Okay.
Then with I'm sure you edit this in some fashion, don't you?
No,
Oh, you don't?
no,
Okay.
we're just going with
Well,
it.
and what I would like to do, for this purpose is to read the first chapter. And the way I ended the event on Saturday was reading the last chapter because that gives the arc of the story.
All right.
And this book has gotten some wonderful reviews. I'm very pleased. I can preface all this to say that it was a book that I started when I was 18 years old.
Hmm.
Started as a poem, it became a short story, and over the years it incubated into a novel. And that process was not an easy one. In fact, I've published now over 40 books. And this, I would say, is the most difficult in terms of the writing. But in many ways, I see it as perhaps one of my most important books.
Okay.
And it's based on true events,
Yeah.
my life, and trauma that I experienced.
Hmm.
But that's not what the book is about.
Right.
It's about what do we do when faced with trauma.
Yeah.
And so this is the story of an 18-year-old boy that, in effect, is me, but is not me. And
Okay.
the truth that I found in this book was in its fiction. And it took a
Oh,
long time to write for that reason. But also, it's a story that I knew I couldn't publish as a book until my children were grown.
I was going to ask about that.
And I really felt that they needed to know what happened to me
Hmm.
before and if they ever read this book, because they know the story. And I'm not sure exactly. I write a lot of books. I don't expect my family to read them all. Yeah, I talk about to my wife about them all.
Hmm.
And, she certainly knew about this incident that I had when I
Yeah,
was 18.
yeah.
And she um, knew that I needed to write this book.
Yes.
And,
I mean, one of my questions was going to be why now? And I think you're already answering that for us.
but in addition, I mean, I think over the years, as the book evolved, it took a shape that became less history and more relevant to the contemporary world because I feel this book focuses on very important and pressing issues in our world today. And it's remarkable to me, while this book is set in the fictional past of 1970
Mhm.
and the fictional present of 1971, that our world today is a lot like that pivot point. That was an inflection point. It was the end of the 1960s. It was peace and love losing ground to frustration and anger and aggression. And it went from being the we decade to the me decade,
Yes.
70s. And so this boy who tells this story is going back and forth between the past and the present. But in reality, the book spans maybe 6 months of his life or
Yeah.
less.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's
Well,
that,
then I was going to say, rather than reading the first chapter now, because I have so many questions for you, and I think they're good ones, and I want to hear your answers on them. Maybe we wait till the end and then see. Can we do that?
sure, but this is pretty short. If
Okay.
you,
All right. All right. Let's do it. Let's do it.
I mean, I don't know that I have to read the last chapter. I think
Okay.
maybe that's the
Yeah.
one
We
I don't.
no spoilers.
Well, as I've been told by many of my dearest friends and critics, is that if they know the ending and it's a spoiler, then it's not a very good book.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
Ride number 14, March 21st, 1971, 8:07 a.m. Facing the traffic on the 11th Avenue entry ramp to I-71 South, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, I thrust my thumb into the cold morning air. The Nashville skyline is calling me with a truth to tell, a twangy sound with a heavy percussive beat. Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone mixed with Walt Whitman's Song of the Open Road. The Nashville skyline, 379 miles away. The lodestone for me, a magnet pulling me closer each step of the way. The freeway is teasing me, seeing my past in the faces of strangers in the car windows speeding past me. Thunderstorms rumble in the distance. I take a deep breath. It's the first day of spring, hoping for someone to make eye contact with me. Aaron Berg, 18 years old, a hippie with frizzy hair and a scar on my chin, a scuffy pea coat I bought in a secondhand store, washed out bell bottoms, a Woodstock patch sewn on one back pocket, and a peace sign embroidered on the other. I rub my palms together. I'm freezing inside. A car slows down and stops on the gravel road about 15 feet in front of me. The rear passenger door creaks open and a puppy darts out of the car to poop. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, is close behind, but slips. I drop my duffel bag and scoop her up, her hands clutching my neck, my left arm holding her tightly as I catch the puppy with my right hand. The girl's mother hurries toward me. I'm out of breath. I lower the girl and the puppy onto the back seat of the car as gracefully as I can, but almost topple over. You're the nicest man ever, she giggles. I feel like a clown. Her mother looks at my duffel bag and then at me, grateful for my help. I can tell she disapproves of hitchhiking, but seems to understand I'm in need. She says she'll give me a ride and motions for me to sit next to her in the front seat. My name's Angie. I'm Aaron, I reply, glancing at her mint green eyes. I don't know what to say, just like I never knew what to say to girls like her in high school. She has a blonde ponytail, a starched blue and white striped blouse with a pointy nose and narrow chin bobbing up and down as she talks. I'm not going very far, she says in a cheery voice, and then raises the index finger of her right hand up to her lips. I love the way Jenny breathes when she's sleeping. I don't even have to look at her. I can tell. Yeah, I nod. Cute. I sink into my seat, withdrawing, musing about the healing powers of the lodestone. Deep down, I know I can be more than who I am right now. I just need to get there. Scouring the landscape, I'm lost in my thoughts. We drive for about 25 miles and she drops me off near an on-ramp to the freeway that looks just like the one I started from. I thank her. She drives away, her tires squealing as she speeds off the gravel shoulder onto the blacktop.
Yes. And so every new chapter is a new ride and a new uh, challenge with your Aaron's relationship with Adriana, and it's quite beautiful. Am I correct in saying that "Come Round Right," the title is from an old Shaker folk hymn?
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, music's been a very important part of my life. I mean, I've written a lot about music. I've done radio shows and written a number of books and made films related to aspects of roots music. And for this novel, I chose Shaker music because of an experience I had doing a radio show in the early 1990s. And it was on Sister Mildred Barker, who was one of the last Shakers at that time, living at Sabbath Day Lake in Maine. And she had passed. And I went to this community, which is, still had a few Shakers and was other people who were, wanted to live that lifestyle. And people talked to me about Sister Mildred and how Sister Mildred knew 800 songs. She had a song
Wow.
for every human emotion. And that just stayed with me.
Yeah.
And it was something about the Shaker world that became part of this novel because of the nature of the trauma that this boy experienced, but also to better the music is Shaker hymns are very, very special for me. And this particular hymn, Simple Gifts or song, um, was one that really resonated. But it's not only resonated for me. I mean, Aaron Copland uses Simple Gifts in his Appalachian Spring Ballet that he wrote for Martha Graham. So, and there have been others who are drawn to this because of the power of the lyrics.
Yeah.
I
I'll have a
went
link to the song too. Yeah.
And so I went deeper into it. So this 18-year-old's interactions with Shakers as a boy growing up is important. And it's his secret in a way, knowing these hymns and having heard them, even though he doesn't sing them, he was raised Jewish, resonated for him. They were a source of strength because I think in music we find a source of strength.
Yes. Yeah. It really affects your emotions. I mean, songs can make you cry, can make you laugh, can make you dance, can bring out so many different emotions. Alan, at heart, you're a poet, and I understand that you have been writing poetry since you were 17, and you write a poem every day. Do you write a poem every day?
I have for the last many, many days. I think I had major surgery on my pancreas going on 7 years ago. And I kept a poetry journal during that time of my life. I've always written poems, But my poetry took a turn then. But even prior to that, the poems that I wrote two. I make artist books in addition to mainstream books, and so I've published in little poetry magazines. But really, for most of my time writing poetry, I put them into artist books, and I mean I can show them to you. But there was one artist book that I did called Sitting Shiva and Garde Nord, and it was an accordion book, a double accordion, and it opened to be fully. It was 12 feet, and
Wow.
it was the death of my about the death of my parents, and they were two sets of seven poems each that were separated by 10 years. And so for me, a lot of my work, in fact, most of it, if not all of it, stays with me. And there are certain subjects that have, I guess, they have natural deaths and that the projects don't continue, but the interests still continue.
Did
So
you
I
write a
kept,
poem this morning, or did you write one today?
well, actually, I was working on one from yesterday that I was just finishing.
Could you share
Uh,
it?
sure. I don't know that it's completely done, but sure.
I'm not going to
That's,
grade you.
but no, that's okay. When I was early for you, um, I went back to this. Usually I write my poems at the end of the day. December 7th. Brokering peace with the present is compelled by the past to do something else. Forgiving what's not there takes belief in what's largely unknown, offering a glint of light that's different, even when everything else appears to be the same, refracting at an oblique angle or seeping through a crack in a wall or window, spewing out colors that are often indetectable.
Pearl Harbor Day inspiration?
Um, Not exactly.
Okay.
I obviously thought of Pearl Harbor, but more, I think it related to just the way I was feeling. In a
Right.
sense, it was a response to doing this book event for Come Round Right the day before. And it, these poems are spontaneous. And I I write them in a way that I guess you could say was automatic, but I revise them over and over and over and over again. And sometimes, I mean, I've been in for me, this particular fall has been a good period for my poems. And I feel um, very grateful that I'm able to do this. Do you want to hear the one from December 6th?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. This one I wrote a little bit earlier in the day. December 6th. In dense fogs, mysteries of sleep wake up, then wander back to unfinished dreams, slipping off with sleight of hand into magic tricks, closing my eyes, hitchhiking a ride to an unknown place where the destination is the journey, remembering the kindness of some and cruelty of others, free to become whoever I can be on the open road, telling stories to myself, by myself, knowing full well that only parts are fact. That was
True.
before the reading.
Yeah, yes. So you call this a novel, and yet, as I read Come Round Right, I felt it was memoir. Now, I recently had a discussion with Linda Dishkus. She's another a local author I work with about what makes the difference between a good first person POV and a memoir. You know, how do you tell the difference? Because again, I read this and I'm like, this is memoir. So other than changing some names, and as you mentioned, you just said that the truth came out in the fiction. So to talk a little bit about that.
Well, in writing this, given, it has fairly graphic descriptions of sexual violence
Yeah.
that occur, that in one major episode, that it was difficult to write about, difficult to want to talk about in terms of what's fact and what's not. But one thing that I did realize in writing this, the more it became memoir, the less it became accessible in a way to others. And I realized in the process, I mean, I probably wrote 100 drafts of this book, and easily. I mean, it only took 52 years. Not that I worked on it all the time, and I wrote a
Right,
bunch
right.
of books in between, but it's always with me. And when until they're done. And
Yeah.
I come back to things. This has just been the shape and form of the sculpture of my life. But with this book, I realized I had a very good editor. She wasn't the formal editor of the book, but she was a member of the Texas Institute of Letters, as I am. We were on a trip to Cuba, and she wanted to read this book because she was a hitchhiker. And so her name's Kathy Appelt, and she mainly writes young adult fiction. She's very accomplished. She's published over 50 books. She's been a finalist for the National Book Award 4 times. And Kathy read the book and she wrote this wonderful critique of it. But the gist of it was, Alan, you have a powerful story here, but it doesn't begin until page 89. Get rid of the first 88 pages.
Oh,
See what that
ouch.
does.
Ouch.
And she was right. I did it.
Yeah.
And then the deeper I got into it, in the rewriting, or I would show it to people, you know, uh, to get just little bits and pieces. And finally, in the end, I discovered that what was making the book more powerful was creating this amazing character, Heidi, but also rethinking and reimagining Adriana.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this book could not be memoir. I mean, what happened to me happened to somebody else, and it may have been worse for her. And so the reality is that out of respect to that, she had to be someone different because it's a person I don't have contact with. We live through something horrible together, but and the takeaway for each of us, we she ended up, I didn't have a continued relationship with her. So um, the reality is that there's parts of what even happens within that context that become fiction. And then it's, what conveys the most powerful story. And so then there was another character, Heidi, who Aaron meets, in a diner in, Appalachia. And Heidi is transformative in Aaron's life
Yeah.
because juxtaposing the past to the present, I could talk about growth, but the dramatically having a character who lived growth with Aaron makes it all the more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So
Yeah.
that's, so I'm very interested in first person writing. I mean, it's something that um, I guess it relates in part to other work I did as a folklorist and as an oral historian, and other my books are people telling stories. All my projects begin with a conversation,
Yeah.
and it's really the medium of expression becomes what appears to be the appropriate form for
Yeah.
what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it may seem like I do a lot of different things, but for me, I'm really doing the same in a sense. I mean,
You're
the visual
interweaving
metaphor,
poetry with with reality, with everything. I mean, everything you do has a poetic element to it, I feel.
it does. And as I've gotten older, it's even more so.
I'm gonna
And
have you, can you switch your, can you, yeah, yeah, bring it down. There you go. I want to see all those books, and we're gonna talk about those books in a minute too. Um,
uh,
I was gonna say Aaron, the character Aaron, at one point, and when he's considering what he should have done, what he didn't do, feeling ashamed, feeling so many different things, he wonders, does anyone deserve to be murdered, even in self-defense? You know, he was wondering, could he live with that? What do you think? Because I read that, I read that question, did anyone deserve to be murdered, even in self-defense? And I immediately said yes.
yes, someone should be murdered. Yes, someone shouldn't be murdered.
That's your answer?
No, I'm asking you. That's what you're asking.
I'm asking you how you would answer those questions. Does anyone deserve to be murdered, even in self-defense?
It's a very difficult question.
Yeah,
And
I know.
does it,
I know.
me, the first time I think I asked this question, seriously, was there was a series of photographs I made in the 1980s. And had been writing about tattooing. There was a style of tattooing that was emerging in the 1980s that originated in prison with homemade machines. And I met someone at a party in Santa Fe and told her what I was doing and was interested in seeing prison tattoos in prison. And she was a PR person for the New Mexico State Penitentiary. It was after the riots that they had had there. And um, I was allowed in to photograph inmates I ended up doing a series called The Hand of the Murderer. And these were men who were 18 to 21 years old who had tattoos of seductive women and flowers on their hands, but their hands looked almost effeminate
Hmm.
because they were shooters. And I talked to these men about, not directly about their crimes, because I think for people like that, or at least the ones I met, they knew their fate was sealed. They were life in prison and they weren't very old. And maybe they would get out. But they talked about how, first of all, that, you know, more than one talked about their own innocence. And the conversation and with another went in the direction of why do people kill? And, which was, I guess, looking back, I was probably a stupid kid asking that question to people who were in prison for killing someone. But they talked about fear, that the reason that at least this one person I talked to, it was killing out of fear.
Mhm.
And that is another category. That's not self-defense, and it's not
Right.
aggression. It's a different emotion.
Yeah.
And so I think, that I understand most clearly, quite frankly, because if someone was going to kill me, I don't know that it's self-defense that's driving me. It's not like self-defense is a little cold. I mean, what's that emotion underneath? What's the
Ah,
what's the deep root of self-defense? Self-defense could, in its own way, be aggression. There could be two macho guys, wanting to get each other to bow down to each other. Or it could be someone who feels genuinely threatened, that
yeah,
if they don't act, they will be killed. Now, in certain situations, like the situation in this book, the question becomes, how do you survive?
yeah.
And, I tend to be a believer in nonviolence. And I think that understanding that, people who kill in their own sick head do it for a reason.
Mm.
And
Ooh,
maybe
well,
sometimes it's totally impulsive, but it's not a either or situation.
yeah.
And I think that, there's more than one incident in this book where the threat of the gun, the meaning of the gun,
Mhm.
what does it really mean? And,
Right.
this boy is given a gun by his roommate to take with him on this Nirvana quest to see the Nashville
Skyline. Yeah.
skyline, and he almost uses it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's torn about using it. So is it one of, and then, the thinking in this was that, it multiplies. Something can happen to you when you're 18, and then when you're 19, and you let it go when you're 18, when it's 19, you think, how could I have been so stupid that I didn't do something else? And it
Ugh.
doesn't relate to guns. So, I mean, what I was really wanting to do in this novel was to go into a direction that others could connect to,
Mhm.
that it wasn't just about what was on the surface. It's about these deeper human anxieties and emotions. But there's also a lot of joy and love in this book. I mean, I'm been very heartened that people who've reviewed it see it as hopeful because it is in the end.
Mhm.
The boy
So
who
the
sets out on his quest
yeah.
and he achieves it and finally realizes why he was doing this quest in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about the crow, one of your motifs.
Well, the crows came into this book at the very end. And it was really a result of, there were two people who read the book in manuscript, and they had a hard time reading this trauma. And,
Yeah, it was. I'll agree that it was a tough read in places. Yeah.
but it was even tougher in terms of as a read in an earlier form. And I realized, Kathy, I'm so sorry. This is my wife. Just one second.
Oh, that's all right. His beautiful wife of almost 37 years, who happens to be an artist, by the way. And I'm gonna ask him about his books, his bookshelves. He doesn't know this yet, but I'm gonna ask him if they're
Okay.
arranged up.
Um, so
Your beautiful wife of almost 37 years.
yes, totally. Um, entirely. And, I meant to have it on silent.
That's
And
okay. That's all right.
I mean,
We're
part of the
having a conversation.
regularity, just to give you a sense of my life.
Yeah, no, we're visiting. This is a visit.
I know. Well, just to put it all in context, my wife and I have been together for over 37 years, married for about 30, going on 37. And we have a wonderful kind of routine. She's an artist as well. And we have a little campus of buildings in Old East Dallas. And she works in one building, I work in another. We have other people. She was the one who recognized this, and she acquired this building where I'm sitting right now, which is a 1918 fire station. And
Oh,
she's in,
nice.
and that was deaccessioned by the city and almost falling down when she got it. But in any case, I start my day fairly early. I go for walks. I'm near what's called the Santa Fe Trail.
Mhm.
Um, I come back, we have lunch together in the firehouse, and then in the mid-afternoon we have coffee together in her studio across the street. So we we have a lot of interaction with each other during the day.
That's wonderful. I love it. So we were
Uh,
talking about the crows.
so the crows, uh, there are crows on the Santa Fe Trail where I go walking. And but Kathy had wanted me to read, some young adult books because there's an aspect of this novel, which is a very adult book in a certain way,
Yeah.
but in another way, if something horrible hadn't happened, it would could be a young adult book because it's a coming of age story.
Yes.
But what I realized was that, and I don't know exactly, it was right near the end when this book was in its final edit that I realized I needed to do something more. And I realized that I hadn't really two things. I needed to do something more to temper this, to give it this more otherworldly kind of presence. Because by creating the crows, and crows have
Yeah.
a varied kind of symbology and meaning, and they are, appear in countless forms. And it brought something new to the book because it brought this sense of the crows, in a way, become more accessible to the reader in a different way. And so it gives it this otherworldly presence, but at the same time, as I realized once I started doing, as Kathy said, that in a way it forces the reader to imagine what's going on in a different way. So
I loved it.
it tempers the graphic reality of the incident that happens, the sexual violence, but it forces the reader to confront him or herself with regard to if they've ever experienced that or what was their own worst, because it had a mystical power for me.
And
And
for me too, as that's how when I read it, it did it really it added to the depth of your writing, which is already incredibly deep, I should say. Another persistent motif or theme that you had in there is Aaron's feeling like Adriana didn't include him in some pretty big decisions, right? And the he always felt kind of like he was floating, didn't know what to say, how to act. Was that you as a young man?
this once again, a complicated question. Was, was that me as a young man that I felt a little left out?
Yeah.
Uh, to some extent, I think that's true. I mean, in this particular instance, uh, yes. I mean, but it was, him not understanding it all. It was just, and, in this case, it was the language that was being spoken,
Right.
um, that it was a deep metaphor for not understanding why people do awful things.
Yeah.
And, and what are the, how do we deal with that when we're confronted with that? I mean, it's the lingering questions. It's the reason, I've gone to therapy and others go to therapy, but it's also for me, beyond that, it is, how I find my own creativity. and realizing, in my life that my deepest creativity comes out of quiet and peace within me. It doesn't
Mhm.
come out of anger or rage. And I might be angry and raging about certain things, but to really approach it creatively. I mean, you hear it in those poems that I read you. I
Mhm.
mean, those are deep and sincere. And I think work is poems. They're not therapy. Well, maybe they are, but that's not for me,
I
they're art.
right. I think art is therapy. It is for me, always has been. I mean, you have all this stuff in your head, in your being, in your psyche, and whatever, and it has to come out some way. Or that's how I feel anyway, when I write. I'm looking at your bookshelves. Are these all your books?
Mine and my wife's. This is the library. We operated this building as a art center between 1992 and 2001. So it's a mix of art books, my books. I mean, if you look around this way, these are in these shelves here are artist books. My wife also makes artist books, but these are largely my artist books.
Hmm.
And this is I like working at this library table. I have another office adjacent to this that has 24 feet of desk space. So
So jealous. I'm so jealous. Is there are your books organized? Do you know where everything is?
by subject, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
generally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. My husband is very organized in subject and in time and all of our books. What are you
Probably
reading?
more organized me.
Oh, I was gonna say, what are you reading right now, and how do you even find time to read? You are an extraordinarily multitasking individual. Um, when
I'm
do you read?
Well, I read, I'm very much up on what's going on in the world because a lot of my work relates to very contemporary issues. I mean, I have a new feature film called Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, The Struggle for Change in Jasper, Texas, that just premiered at Cinema Village in New York with a retrospective of 12 of my movies. So I read the New York Times and I read, the headlines of the Washington Post and selectively read other work. I'm constantly writing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
um, my most recent read was and revisiting was this book. And this was a book called The Day the Dancers Came,
Okay.
Selected Prose Works by Benvenuto and Santos.
Okay.
And this was a writer that my father knew and who had lost contact with. My father went to University of Illinois. World War II came. He never became a writer. He always, during his life, championed my aspirations to be a writer. But through a writer friend, I heard about Ben Santos. We had one of his books, and he had not seen this man in 35 or more years. And I was able to reconnect him. And Ben Santos was living in exile in the United States. He had written a book about Marcos, called The President. And he was in the United States on a Rockefeller Foundation grant and told that if he went back to the Philippines, he'd be arrested. So he and his wife went to Wichita. In any case, my father met with them, and Benny gave him this book.
Oh,
And
wow.
this book is a story called My Most Memorable Christmas in America. And it's about a Christmas that the writer, had with my father and a black janitor in a YMCA in Chicago. And he didn't tell him the story was there.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh
so
my gosh, what a gift.
and so I just reread that story.
Oh,
Uh
that gives me goosebumps.
yeah, it's a very special one. But and I read poetry, but because my day is a mix of, I manage a lot of different kinds of projects. And I make sure I save time for writing, certainly by the end of the day, if I can. But it's today I have meetings, and I'm doing this podcast. And so, yeah, I get the Sunday New York Times every week, and I read bits and pieces. And and then, I read books and articles that relate to other things that I'm doing, subjects. So
So I've
recreational reading, uh, not as much as I used to, but
uh,
because it's surprisingly, in a way for me, this is a very productive time in my life. And
that's
it's I didn't necessarily expect that that would be the case, but
that's
it's,
encouraging. That's very encouraging. And so I've watched a lot of different interviews and past interviews that you've done, and I need to know to what you attribute uh, your phenomenal memory, because your recall astounds me in these interviews that you've done. I mean, names and places and dates, and uh, tell us your secret for your memory.
well, I mean, that varies too. And, if I don't remember everything about my books, and I don't expect to. And I don't, and yes, I remember a lot of things, but one of the most influential people in my writing life was an afternoon I spent with George Louis Borges when he was a visiting writer at Michigan State University. And he, uh, I love that I've have read many times so much of what he's written, especially his poems, which are lesser known. And but one of the things he talked about, because he gave me a little reading list for writing in the first person. And
Okay.
because I talked to him about my interest in doing that, because
I would like that list, by the way.
oh, it's
Send it to me.
pretty, it's small. I
Send it to
mean, he
me.
basically, well, I can tell you, he said you should read The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins and read Robert Browning. And then he quoted things in Old Norse and Middle English that, of course, I could never say. But in any case, one of the things that he told me was that memory is forgetting. And so, in part, you have to forget to be able to remember. And that's, it's one of those, it's kind of an oxymoron there,
Right.
because I think, and he talked about, for me, to me, he talked about how he remembered his life in quotations. Now, this was someone who went blind, obviously, and was considered the most well-read person in the world during his lifetime. And he's right, and that's in part what my novel's about. It's quotations in a sense, it's creating, inventing quotations. But the whole idea, it's as we go on through life, uh, we distill our memories. And in part, my nonfiction work, I explore this idea of hybridized history and the way in which history can, distills itself, particularly in oral traditions.
Okay. That makes
And
sense.
and so for me, my ability to sort of see it in a different way, I mean, and I remember dates that I think are important, but like anyone, there's things that I forget,
Do you
and that's
dream? Do you remember your dreams?
rarely.
Okay.
Usually, I remember the ones that unsettle me, but I don't have nightmares per se. But sometimes I'm kind of, end up going down paths I didn't think I should be going down.
I think sometimes the things that we try to forget come out in dreams, and maybe that's how we forget. There has to be selective forgetting, I suppose.
Well, but and I think it's just one has to, I think, for me, is, part of that. This is another lesson of the book in a bigger sense is, the lesson of forgiveness, not only as it relates to others, but to ourselves. I mean, that we need to learn to find compassion for ourselves. And it doesn't necessarily diminish the compassion and love we have for someone else. If anything, having compassion for ourselves, I think, can enhance the love we have for others.
Yeah, and forgiveness is difficult. I've talked about this on with with other people. You know, if you can't forgive someone, then they have power over you, and that's sometimes not a good thing. Uh,
Well, that's a lot of what this book is about,
yeah,
is that whole idea, you know. I think in this last poem that I just wrote, it kind of reiterates, one of the key points in the book
yeah, yeah.
is forgiveness for what's not there.
Right, right. Well, to change the subject a little bit, last night I watched Stoney Knows How.
Oh, great.
Oh my goodness. Everyone out there right now on Amazon Prime, download, pay 99 cents or to rent it or buy it for what, $1.99, whatever. Stoney, Stoney knows how. What an incredible short film documentary. It was absolutely beautiful. I I laughed. I was amazed. He's what a man. What a man. And for you to have been able to capture him and his life and his irreverence and his talent, I thank you for doing that. Unbelievable. And so this is going to be another difficult question for you. How is it that people like Stony or people like Chloe Crabb, a 13-year-old girl I've been interviewing who was born with spinal muscular atrophy, and her goal is to walk someday. How is it that these people can share so much light and optimism when there are others whose day would be ruined if they broke a fingernail? There's an easy question for you.
Well, I guess for me, I mean, my own personal life, I had a lot of obstacles when I was growing up. And, I grew up in Dorchester.
Dorchester. My dentist was in Dorchester.
Well, Dorchester changed a lot in the 1950s, and my parents moved away, but it's a long story. I mean, it was in the house that my grandmother had bought in 1920. It's one of the triple deckers.
Wow.
And, but in any case, I grew up with different kinds of trauma, I mean, in my life. And my mother had a seizure disorder that was not very well diagnosed, and she had a terrible seizure when I was in the third grade
Ugh.
and turned blue and crashed onto the floor. And, I ran out of the house screaming that my mother was dead.
Oh.
And then she, suffered with this. It was never really adequately diagnosed her whole life. And I finally, some years after she died, met someone who had this kind of seizure disorder. And I finally understood what it was. It was some deformity in the amygdala part of her brain. And, but in any case, so I guess I learned a lot of compassion growing up. And in a lot of my childhood, I, was helped my mother a lot. And, after a certain age, I wanted to break free and have a life.
Mm.
See the world. I wanted to see America, and I wasn't joining the Navy. So, but when I met Stoney, it was very much by accident.
Right.
I was writing a college paper, and I needed to do I was taking a folklore class, and I wandered off campus one night trying to figure out what am I going to write about, and saw this sign, as ancient as time, as modern as tomorrow, tattooing by the teacher of the art. And I went back the next day, and Stoney was in his shop. I mean, when I looked in the night before, I saw the silhouette of this man in a wheelchair and this basset hound howling at me. It was a mix of, it was the total mix of who I was and am. You know, for me, it was simultaneously a scene from a novel from Franz Kafka to, being this other kind of documentary, intensity. It's that crossroads between fact and fiction and all the emotions that that evokes. So I go back the next day. I have my first 35 millimeter camera that my parents had given me for my 21st birthday. And I started snapping away in front of Stoney's shop. And he told me to get the hell away from the front of it. And I wandered off and made some photographs of his train station and came back and looked in this tattoo shop, and he said, "You can come in now." And the reason I scolded you was because you didn't ask permission to make my picture. And I knew I was in the wrong, and I apologized. And he continued to do what he could to gross me out. He wanted me to feel his little shriveled up muscle. He had a pistol hidden in his wheelchair that he slammed on the desk, emptied out these bullets from its cylinder and said,
Oh
"You
my
know
God.
what a ballpoint bullet does?" And I said, "No, not
I
really.
do.
Shatters when it enters the body." So I'm sitting there shaking in my shoes, and this big guy comes in and wants to get the tattoo. It's a skull with a dagger through it with the little inscription, "Death before dishonor." And Stoney looks at this guy and says, "Haas, you're not afraid to let this boy make your picture, are you?" And that was my immersion into the world of Stoney Sinclair. But Stoney was so much more than just a subject of study. He was a grandfather figure for me. My grandparents died when I was young, and he talked to me about everything from condoms to what I should do on a first date. And
You visited with him over 7 years, right?
yeah, I used to see him. And I was gone for about a year, and he died the year that I moved away to go to graduate school to get my PhD.
He
And
died young. Yeah.
well, actually, he lived to be 68 years old, given the fact that he had such severe rheumatoid arthritis, couldn't open his hands flat, you know. I mean,
But never, and again, please, people, watch this documentary. Any little ache or pain you have, you just need to watch this. This man
oh, great.
is
Well, you know what the 40th anniversary of that was my first book. And the movie was an outgrowth of just, I didn't know how to make movies. And I just wanted to make one about him. And,
Did you let him give you a tattoo? Do you have any tattoos?
well, I've just premiered this new movie of mine with the retrospective. There's also a feature-length tattoo film of mine uh, called Tattoo Uprising that has
Okay.
parts of Sony. But in any case, that question came up, and it used to come up more. And my response is tattoos are private. Whether or not we choose to talk about them is at our discretion. And so for me, that's the answer I give. But
All
when
right.
people asked that question to me when I was with Stoney,
Yeah.
Stoney would say, "Alan's got tattoos all over his brain. Don't let him.
Oh,
He's got them all over his brain." And so,
what
I
an
was
answer.
just a
What
20,
an incredible answer. He
you
is
know,
an
and he was, I was, when I met Stoney, I was 21. When I was writing this book, I was, 23 to 25. Then I spent the next, years trying to get the thing published and did the movie, had a lot of complications there, but the movie Stoney premiered in New York at Film Forum, movie theater in 1981. And then it was brought to this theater by Les Blank, who shot the movie, and Vincent Canby reviewed it in the New York Times, and it was shown as part of the new director's series at MoMA the following spring. And it made me a filmmaker, though I was still learning, and Les was, championed that movie.
it's a
But that
fabulous movie.
it's been in distribution now for 40 years.
Yeah.
And the 40th anniversary of my edition of my book, Stoney Knows How, has just been published a couple of years ago.
And the fact
And
that myself, my husband, and our 32-year-old son watched it last night and absolutely were astounded and
well,
seriously, I mean, we were like, oh my gosh. And, we were a little hesitant, to what's this going to be
no,
about? Is it going to be, worth? I mean, immediately drew us in and kept us for the whole, what is it, 32 minutes or something?
no,
It's,
it's
yeah.
28 minutes. What's so interesting, I love what you're saying because when I was doing the 40th anniversary edition of this book, I interviewed a tattoo artist in Ohio, and he had some Stoney memorabilia and drawings and stuff that I wanted to put in the book. And he said, I've watched your movie more times than you have. I've watched it every day for 15 years because in the morning, that's the way I want to start my day because it makes me feel good.
Yes, yes. And it's more than a one-time watch. I mean, it is rich and he talks
Oh, that's
fast.
great.
And
Well, it's obviously very dear to my heart, that's for sure.
oh, you can sure tell that. I have a tattoo. I got a tattoo when I was 51. My mother, of course, was horrified. She's like, "That'll come off, right?" No, mom. No, mom, it won't. Anyway, I have one more question for you. I have a million questions for you, but I think I'll end on this one. You mentioned in a previous interview that I listened to a feeling a sense of urgency, maybe lately, maybe since your pancreatic surgery. What more do you feel like you need to do in order to secure your legacy? Talk about the sense of urgency because that I too feel it sometimes.
Well, for me, that sense of urgency has always been there.
Always.
I'm very grateful for having a through thread in my life that started when I was so young. And so it's always been propelled by a sense of urgency, the need to do it, to need to tell a story that someone else hasn't told, to need to help someone else tell their story, like Stoney, to give that first person perspective to the sideshow and the freak show that he lived through. And Stoney was denied an education because he was considered too grotesque to go to school. Well, for me, that sense of urgency is always there. I mean, it was certainly heightened by thinking that I could die.
Yeah.
It was, by being told that I had a cyst that was half the size of my pancreas,
Mm.
and that I needed to do surgery sooner than later, after monitoring this for a year. Yes, that was a different sense of urgency. The urgency I feel now is I want to just keep doing as much as I can. I mean, in my work, but family is very important to me. I'm very, my wife and I have a very good marriage. I have a son with my wife who's now has two little ones, a 2-year old and a 5-month old. And my daughter um, has two girls that are 10 and 7, and we're a very great blended family. So that means a lot to me. And it's just finding the right balance. I mean, in some sense, my aspirations are greater. I don't know that I can accomplish it all, but it's really that's the kid in me that keeps me going. And in terms of legacy, I think about my literary estate. I think about the work that I've done through documentary arts. I've never been a full-time executive director of documentary arts. There's a book that's just been published in conjunction with a show that's still going on at the Center for Photography at Woodstock through January 11th. And it's called Everyday Culture, 7 Projects of Documentary Arts. And it's really a 40-year survey of my work. And my goal with this is to pass it on. Is I want to, so I'm looking into different places to gift my collections
Mm.
in terms of what happens to them next. But on that said, at the same time, my year this year started with a 50-year survey of my photographs. There was the world premiere of a new musical of mine the book I wrote with for the musical with Phaedra Michelle Scott. but it's based on a children's book of mine called Stompin' at the Savoy, the story of Norma Miller. This
Uh,
novel was published in May. I've had two nonfiction books. There's this book, Everyday Culture, which is in part written by Brian Wallace from the Center for Photography Woodstock and myself. And then there's a book being published by Aperture that is be out officially at the beginning of the year, but it's just now being published on the Texas African American Photography Archive that I started with my wife. And so I'm very active in terms of what I'm doing. And it's tough. I mean, and so I work on many fronts. Then I have my new movies that are, and there's other exhibitions and other things. So what keeps me going is, yes, I think about legacy, but I think more about what am I doing, 10 minutes from now, and where do I want to be? And that doesn't necessarily mean just obsessed with work. Maybe what I need is another walk because I walk 4 to 6 miles every day and,
yes,
and
excellent.
regardless of the weather. And so I, uh, it's all very important to me. So there's a sense of urgency, but within that, there's got to be, the inner time, the peace time that kind of helps keep it all in perspective. It's not always perfect by any
Uh,
means, and I don't
you
expect it to be.
you had
I continue to make mistakes like everyone.
you
It's
had to
just
have been born.
recognize.
You had to have been. So I think this goes back to my question about like Stony and Chloe, and how do those people continue to bring and you continue to continue to live, continue to, Chloe threw away her journals that she wrote when she was 10 years old and was about to give up because she was so unlike everyone else. She threw them away because and now she's a 13-year-old activist and a poet, an
Well,
incredible
I have
poet.
I have a book that she should read that's written by a teenage boy, was written by a teenage boy with cerebral palsy. It's called This Kid Can Fly. And there's a
Okay.
chapter in that book about my film, You Don't Need Feet to Dance, which
Yeah.
is which you might want to check out and
Yeah.
she should check out. But this boy, Aaron Phillip, has transitioned and is now Aaron Rose Phillip and
Okay.
is one of the first, if not the first, African American female model to become the I guess one of the lead people for advertising the Moschino luxury brand. Aaron Rose Phillip in a wheelchair. She was featured on the cover of Vogue magazine.
Oh my goodness.
So you might want to check that out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would really love
And
to
I
get
think
this
Chloe
young
might
gal
like.
some exposure.
Um,
She's amazing.
on a closing note, with all my books, I always try to think of inscriptions. And the inscription that I have landed on. I don't know how long it stays, but I like it. And it's just a phrase that came to mind that when I signed those books, that it says, with accountability and appreciation comes growth.
With accountability and appreciation comes growth.
And that's what the book is about.
It is. Oh my goodness. Listeners out there, we've been talking with Alan Govenar, author of his latest book, Come Round Right, which you need to get, and what, 40 some odd other books, and film and photography and screenplays and
I haven't really written a screenplay yet.
no? Oh well,
Yeah.
get on it. Get on it, slacker. Alan, this was absolutely delightful. People out there, like and subscribe. I always get my fingers wrong. Like and subscribe. Buy me a coffee if you liked this interview. I could talk with you all week, but I know that your wife is ready for lunch probably, and
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 I
may,
am,
and maybe
and
you
I
two are gonna have maybe you
have,
two are gonna have a little nap later.
I don't know. No, she's going to be working in her studio, and I'm going to a meeting, and then I have another meeting. So, we will have dinner together, though.
I so appreciate you carving out this chunk of time in your very busy day. And Alan, thank you again so much. And I wish you the best. Now get to work.
I will, and you too. I want to
Thank you.
know more about you, and but I do have to go.
Okay.
Send me when this link is
I
live.
shall. I shall. We'll see you soon. Bye.